Hi, this is Dominic Pace, who plays Gekko the Bounty Hunter from The Mandalorian, and you are listening to Star Wars Comics in Canon.
Hello there and welcome to Star Wars Comics in Canon, your guide to the wider Star Wars canon through the comic book lens. And to take you on this journey, I'm your host, Mike Burton. And so brings episode 68. So then guys, this week we are on to the next volume of the War of the Bounty Hunters 34-issue crossover event. So I've already done the prelude, that was on episode 60. I've done chapter 1, which was in episode 64, and now this is chapter 2, obviously episode 68. Now in this one there are now 6 comics involved in this. The order for them is Bounty Hunters 14, Doctor Aphra 12, War of the Bounty Hunters 2, Darth Vader 14, Jabba the Hutt 1, and then Star Wars 15. Now, I want to remind everyone that the Darth Vader comics is the third run of Darth Vader comics, which was first in 2020, and the Dr. Aphra comics and the Star Wars comics are the second runs of those respective series, and they also started in 2020 as well. Bounty Hunters is its own series, and then War of the Bounty Hunters is its own mini-series, and then Jabba the Hutt is the one-shot. In the next few volumes as well, there's going to be one-shots. I think the next one-shot is Forlum and Zuckuss. The one after that, I think, is Boosh, and the one after that I think is IG-88. So going forward from this episode, there are going to be 6 comics to be involved with per volume. So that's generally where we are, and just to remind any new listeners to go back and check out episodes 60 and 64, but also that I'm going to talk about the narratives of these, give sort of footnotes, descriptions of the plot and whatnot, and then talk about the connective tissue and other things. And I have got here about 17 notes of connective tissue, which is a lot. There's normally about 5 to 10 per episode I do of this, depending on what it is, but as these are the newest comics that you can get, there's a lot of connective tissue, and Charles Soule is very good at connecting his stuff to previous things as well, and he has written 2 of these comics as well. So lots of things to connect to, so we're just going to get right into it. So the first one, as I said, is the Bounty Hunters number 14. It is written by Ethan Sachs, the artist is Paolo Villanelli, and the colour artist is Arif Prianto. This was out July 7th, 2021, and the story is called The Following. So here is the crawl. Jabba the Hutt has put a bounty on Boba Fett's head. Valance and Dengar have formed a shaky alliance in order to find Fett first. Valance is desperate to save his old friend Han Solo, and Dengar has an agenda of his own. Dengar's contact revealed that Han is in the hands of a resurgent Crimson Dawn. At the fortress of the Mourner's Whale, Taonga and her wife, Losha, found the syndicate decimated and under assault by Crimson Dawn warriors. On Nar Shaddaa, a terrifying assassin wounded Valance and killed the Hunter's only lead to finding Crimson Dawn and Han Solo. It's worth noting here as well that the events of Bounty Hunters number 14 take place before War of the Bounty Hunters number 1. Also, the Jabba the Hutt comic that I'm tackling later has got flashbacks and, in air quotes, current time, and they take place at different points as well. So, ever so slightly confusing, but if you read it in the reading order that I've been going through with it, it does make sense. There's just a little bit of light reminding that needs to go into it. But yeah, let's get started with the narrative then for Bounty Hunters number 14. A character called Deathstick shot Valance quite badly, and so him and Dengar flee. They head to a person called Mama Stamox, and this person knows Dengar as he owes her some credits. And she says to him, "Look what the Tuka dragged in." So a couple of things to note here. First of all is the character Deathstick. Now Deathstick is a character that I'd never heard of before reading War of the Bounty Hunters, and that is because they are a character that, aside from these War of the Bounty Hunters comics, the only other place they actually showed up, and the first place they showed up, is from the mobile game Star Wars Uprising. Now Star Wars Uprising isn't even available anymore. I think it was online for about a year and a half, so there's not even a way to go and check that. I presume some people have got maybe some footage of it on YouTube or something along those lines, but it does have some sort of vague campaign mode or story mode in that, or there's at least information about the characters that are within that. And Deathstick is a female Dathomirian Zabrak. So she's from Dathomir, and Zabrak is the same species as Darth Maul, but also Asajj Ventress is a Zabrak. But Most female Zabraks have got the horns that you would recognise that Darth Maul and Savage Opress have. However, on Dathomir, it's slightly different. On Dathomir, there's various clans and different people who live in different places, but the male Zabraks that live on Dathomir generally fall under the Night Brothers, and the females that live on Dathomir generally fall under the clan Night Sisters. Now, there are other clans, as I've said, just a bit to get into all of that is going to be very confusing, and also in the canon there isn't a huge amount of stuff. There's only bits and pieces, but the Night Sisters, they're heavily in the Clone Wars. They're also in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and in essence a Night Sister is someone who can generally use magic, which is basically a form of using the Force. It's all very complicated and things, but this Night Sister, to our knowledge, hasn't got Force abilities, or at least doesn't show them in these comics, but she's called Deathstick. As I said, she's a female Dathomirian Zabrak Night Sister, and she left before the slaughter, which is in Clone Wars, and there's also reference in Jedi Fallen Order. In essence, Grievous goes down there and kills basically everyone, it's a really cool episode, but it is quite dark. She hid in the Anoat sector, which is where Hoth, Bespin and Burnin Con are found. And the only other bit of information about Deathstick is that she was an assassin, she was involved in drug trades and stuff, and then she scarred her face after a run-in with the Empire. That is the short version of essentially who she is, apart from me rambling on about Dathomirian people and stuff. But she's a bounty hunter, in essence, at the moment, and she's called Deathstick, and she has a lot of wraps and things covering relatively all of her body, aside from her eyes, which you can see out of. She's wearing purple. So that's who Deathstick is. Mama Stomac isn't actually very important. There's not much about her, so we can sort of glaze over that. But when she said, look what the Tuka dragged in, a Tuka is, in essence, just a Star Wars cat. So they're a feline species. You actually first saw them in Clone Wars. They were toys, in essence. In Legends, there was a Star Wars role-playing game, and they were called Adaris felines, but they're basically the same thing. In Star Wars Rebels, there's Tukas, but then there's also Loth cats. So Clone Wars, you generally see toys of them. I can't remember if you see a Tuka. I think there's one or two of them around in the whole of Clone Wars. But in Star Wars Rebels, you see Tukas a little bit more, and you see the subspecies of a Tuka, which is a Loth cat, which isn't really that different from a Tuka. But you also see them, I think in Mandalorian, you actually get to see a couple of Tukas as well. But just imagine a Star Wars cat. You've probably seen them around. That's what a Tuka is, and if they're on Lothal, they're called Loth cats. So I just thought I'd flag that as well. So obviously Valance and Dengar went to Mama Stamox, and then it cuts to the other characters that are in the Bounty Hunters comics, which is Taonga and Losha. So they're at the Mourner's Whale Syndicate's hiding place, and Taonga is speaking with a gentleman named Kamdek. They are fighting Crimson Dawn, who have started attacking them and things. And while the fighting's going on, Taonga gets approached by a thug, who, when she doesn't notice, and then her wife, Losha, shoots from a distance. And Kamdek then confirms to Taonga that Crimson Dawn have returned. And you find that as a common theme, because in this chapter, it just seems almost every comic is a character finding out that Crimson Dawn has returned, or talking about the fact that Crimson Dawn has returned. Now, you should know who Crimson Dawn are from the last couple episodes I've done on this, but for clarity, it was basically a crime syndicate set up by Darth Maul around the time of the Clone Wars and whatnot. In Solo, a Star Wars story is where they really come to light and things, and you see it was who Trident Voss was meant to look like the leader of, but Darth Maul was above him, sort of in the shadows. So back to Dengar, he contacts Bib Fortuna, and the reason Dengar is doing all these things for Jabba isn't just necessarily for the money, but they're actually holding someone who is dear to him called Manaru. So I hadn't actually heard of Manaru before, but in Legends she has quite a lot of information about her. So she is basically Dengar's, let's just call her girlfriend for ease. In the canon, she's kind of Dengar's girlfriend. They've confirmed it a little bit in the sprinkling that we've had of her in canon, but as I said, in Legends there's a lot more to her. In Legends, she is dating Dengar, and then she actually helps save Boba Fett. So when he comes out of the Sarlacc pit, Dengar comes across him. He was going to kill Boba Fett, and Manaru actually stops Dengar from killing him. And then oddly enough, Boba Fett gets asked to be the best man at Dengar and Manaru's wedding, which is a really bizarre, random thing, but I saw that online and thought that was quite fun. So obviously in here, when you hear Manaru, at this time we are assuming that Dengar and her are dating. But anyway, Mama Stamox says that the last owner of the bar that they're currently residing in was killed by an IG assassin droid, which is obviously linking to IG-88. And while they're talking, it shows that Valance's core processor has now been stabilised, because that was around the area that he was hit and why he started to die. However, the human heart that's connected to all the cybernetics is too strained, and that he is likely going to die quite soon. Dengar isn't overly fussed by that, and asks about Crimson Dawn. Mama says to him to just run, and Dengar comments that he's never seen Mama scared of anything before. She says if you want to live to be my age, then you better learn when to be scared, and mentioned that Dengar was just a pup back then. Obviously pup meaning young person, or youngling, however you want to put it. The word pup does come up in other comics in this chapter, it seems, oddly enough, which I haven't really noticed it being used in Star Wars before, but who knows. Now I'm just going to read a bit from Mama, because she basically gives a good explanation onto why she's scared. It's some really, really cool artwork and montage and things. I do recommend picking this issue up, but I'm just going to read what she says. During the Clone Wars, a shadow collective emerged, uniting much of the underworld. Imagine getting the Black Sun, the Pikes, and the Mandalorian Death Watch to work together without killing one another. Someone did. Then again, there was never really a choice. Among the syndicates that were convinced was a band of murderers and thieves called Crimson Dawn. Then suddenly, it all came crashing down. After the siege of Mandalore and the rise of the Empire, the collective crumbled, gone as quickly as they appeared. Many of those syndicates went deep underground, but the truly ambitious will not stay hidden for long. Crimson Dawn returned, deadlier than before. Cold-blooded murderers like Dryden Voss wreaked havoc across the Outer Rim, at least until somebody killed him in cold blood. Then, after a few years, the Crimson Dawn just disappeared again. Some say the Dawn never truly left, lying in wait for something big. And Valance says, sounds like fairy tales to me, but that robed assassin who attacked me last night, she seemed real enough. And Mama says, what did she look like? Valance shows her like a recording he took with his cybernetics, and then she freaks out. She yells, what did you do? And they're like, what's going on? She's like, you were attacked by Deathstick and you came here? You've killed us all. And Dengar's like, aren't you overreacting? And then the wall near them explodes, and Deathstick comes in and says, I assure you, she is not overreacting. It then goes back to Onga, and she explains the situation to Kamdek. You know, the two fighting crime families, and a member of each of them got together, and then they had a kid called Cadelia, and Cadelia is the granddaughter of Kamdek. And in essence, he asks her to bring Cadelia home and says that she'll need a bigger team because you cannot underestimate Crimson Dawn. So back to Valance and Dengar and Mama's place, they're all getting shot at. There's Deathsticks run in with 2 swords and several droids. Now the droids that she's with are actually called ASN courier droids. Now they are in Attack of the Clones, and they're actually used by the bounty hunter Zam Wessel. So when Obi-Wan and Anakin near the start of the movie are protecting Padme, and then that droid goes up to the window, shoots like a laser circle in the window, and then puts those poisonous millipede things in there, that thing, which Obi-Wan then dives out the window and grabs onto, is an ASN courier droid. In Legends, they're in the Bounty Hunters game, which is where you star as Jango Fett. It's actually quite a fun game. I think it's on like original Xbox and PlayStation 2. That's a really fun game that I remember playing, and they're in that as well. So Deathstick is attacking with these courier droids that are shooting blasters everywhere, and Valance and Dengar blow up a wall and then flee in a speeder. The droids are pursuing them, and then their ship crashes. Valance manages to save Dengar by using his grapple hook and grabbing onto Dengar, and then Dengar's like, you saved me. I mean, you could have just left me to die and no one would have known. And Valance is like, well, I would have known. And then the final panels show that Deathstick has Valance and Dengar in her sights, says to Qi'ra that she could just kill them, and Qi'ra says not to. She's herding them in a very specific direction, and it's part of her plan, but she says, don't worry, you'll get to kill them soon enough. And that is where Bounty Hunters 14 ends. So obviously, as you guys know that Qi'ra, I mentioned her from the last batch of these comics that I was tackling. Qi'ra is the love interest of Han Solo in Solo: A Star Wars Story, played by Emilia Clarke, just in case you needed some reminding there. So that is Bounty Hunters number 14, which means we move on to Dr. Aphra 12. So Dr. Aphra 12 is written by Alyssa Wong, the penciler is Minkyu Jung, the inker is Victor Olazaba, and the colour artist is Rachelle Rosenberg, and it was released July 14th, 2021. The story is called Party Tricks, and here is the crawl. Rogue archaeologist Dr. Aphra and smuggler Sana Staros are working for Domina Taig. The job? Infiltrate the most dangerous place in the galaxy, an auction hosted by the resurgent crime syndicate Crimson Dawn. Meanwhile, Just Lucky and Ariel Yu's old mentor has betrayed the Sixth Kin Syndicate, and they've been tasked with assassinating him right under Crimson Dawn's nose. With all these crime syndicates and gangsters gathered in one place, what could possibly go wrong? So Aphra and Sana are at the auction. They're on a ship called the Vermilion, which is on a planet called Jakara. Now they spot Jabba, Vakora, and Gyurti. Now, obviously, you know Jabba the Hutt is, and I'll get onto more information about him when we get onto his little solo comic. Vakora is from the Prelude, so that was the Prelude comic, and also the 2020 Aphra run. She does appear as well. She's like kind of hunting Aphra. And so Gyuti is the one I want to flag here, because I recognize him somewhat, and it's because he is one of the leaders of the Black Sun Syndicate, which were in Clone Wars as well as Star Wars Rebels. Now, Gyuti actually put out a bounty on a character called Jaz Emari, who's in the Aftermath trilogy, and so she's mentioned in Aftermath Life Debt and Empire's End, which are two books that I really recommend, especially for people who are trying to delve into the world of Star Wars books. The Chuck Wendig Aftermath trilogy, they're really good. I really enjoy the characters that are introduced in there. I like the interlude chapters that are about different characters as well. You find out what happened to Jar Jar. There's information about Cobb Vanth, who people who watch Mandalorian Series 2 know who that is, as well as Malakili, who is the Beastmaster in Return of the Jedi, who cries when the Rancor dies. And I think the Rancor's called Petisa, if I'm correct. And so, yeah, long-winded way of saying he's just the leader of the Black Sun Crime Syndicate, and you get to see kind of what happens to them in Clone Wars and Rebels. So anyway, Aphra is there, and she's getting intel for Domina Tague as requested. And she sees the Umbaran there and worries about Darth Vader. Now, the Umbaran will show up again in the Darth Vader comic I'm tackling a little bit later, and the Umbaran is a character called Sly Moore. You see her in episodes 2 and 3. She is Palpatine's aide and one of the lead administrators, and she is actually Force sensitive as well, and was one of the very few people who knew he was a Sith. And one of the powers that she has specifically is she is good at influencing people, so basically a Jedi mind trick, but for dark side users, basically the same thing. And what she does is she uses it to influence the politicians quite a lot, which may explain some of the reason why there were so many people for Palpatine when he was calling out and saying some peculiar things in episodes 2 and 3 and constantly granting himself, emergency power and all these sorts of other things. Granted, Jar Jar is one of the people who got him to have emergency power and things, which is tackled in the Aftermath book as well. But in essence, it kind of works well that if someone can have some sort of vague influence on a lot of the weak-minded politicians who are maybe on the fence and kind of push them more so to agree with Palpatine, as well as Palpatine's general influence anyway, that would really help his reign. So it's just quite interesting hearing about her, but you'll find out a lot more about her when I tackle the Darth Vader comic in 2 comics time. So back to the story, Aphra spills a drink on a character called Zet. Now, she is a high up in, once again, the Black Sun Syndicate. Now, Zet is a Faline, as was the Gyuti gentleman I mentioned earlier. They're kind of like Myrians, which is what Luminara is, and what Venestra Row is, and what Barriss Offee is. Essentially green-skinned humanoids, but the Faline are more reptilian. They have much more defined facial features in the sense that their cheekbones are quite protruding and things, and they look slightly more gaunt than maybe a Myrian does. The Black Sun's Council, which you see in the Clone Wars, actually resided on Mustafar as well, which is quite interesting. And obviously that's before the events of Revenge of the Sith, but Darth Maul has an encounter with them there, which is quite a cool watch. But yeah, Zet, she's a female and she's high up in the Black Sun. And the reason that Aphra spilled a drink on her was she was trying to steal data crystals that were attached to her necklace. It failed, but she did give her something in return. While Aphra and Sana are wandering around this auction and Aphra causing some amount of havoc, Just Lucky and Ariel are looking for Cray, and Just Lucky spots him and notes that he is old. Now, Cray is their old mentor and things. I can't remember if it said that in the crawl, but they know him and he kind of helped train them up and things. So it turns out that Aphra actually inserted some sort of tracker device into Zet's necklace, and Zet is currently washing the drink out of her outfit that Aphra spilled on her, because Aphra wanted to keep a tab on Zet, especially with that necklace that she wants so badly. A hooded figure then grabs Aphra, and she mentions that he has a clone's voice, and he just ignores her mentioning that, and he asks her to cause a distraction. She doesn't want to do that, and he then threatens her and says, "I'm pretty certain that almost everyone here would want you dead, so why don't we keep that on the down low, and you can just cause the distraction when this beeper goes off, and then we'll all be happy." So he gives her a little device and takes a step back. Qi'ra then emerges and calls out to the crowd, and starts the bidding on Han Solo frozen-in-carbonite at 100,000 credits. While this happens, Just Lucky and Ario follow Cray as he's kind of goes away from the party and things. They get into this abandoned corridor, and then Cray pulls out an electro staff. He then speaks to them while they're fighting. He says he wants to talk, and they say that they don't want to, so then they start a confrontation. He pulls out the electro staff, he hits Just Lucky with it, as well as Ario, and is quite easily beating them in the fight. It shows that in the panels, while they are fighting, you watch the bids slowly increasing. It goes up and up and up until Jabba the Hutt offers 1 million credits for Han Solo. Qi'ra then accepts that, then Aphra's signal to cause distraction goes off. Before she can cause distraction or anything, a voice is heard and Darth Vader appears. And the last few pages of this is really interesting because it shows Aphra having a panic attack. The artwork is really, really good. It's some of my favourite. It's arguably my favourite in this sort of batch of comics I'm doing this episode thus far. It looks very cool. It's very well done. And yeah, she basically has a panic attack and Sana Starros grabs her and then she kind of is panicking, thinking that Vader's got her and whatnot. Because obviously in the previous Dr. Aphra comics, Vader has tried to kill her numerous times and she manages to keep evading him. And then right at the end of the comic, the final panel is as Aphra is on the floor, kind of finding it hard to breathe and whatnot due to the panic attack, she drops the communicator thing that was given to her by the hooded figure that is beeping and whatnot. It makes a ding noise on the floor, and then Vader turns around. And that is where Dr. Aphra number 12 ends. So we now move on to War of the Bounty Hunters number 2. The writer for this is Charles Soule, the artist is Luke Ross, the colour artist is Neeraj Menon, and this comic was released July 14th, 2021. The name of War of the Bounty Hunters 2 is The Scoundrel's Bail, and here's the crawl. Boba Fett claimed the bounty of notorious smuggler and rebel officer Han Solo, but Solo was stolen from Fett on Nar Shaddaa by Crimson Dawn. Now, Crimson Dawn seeks to offer Solo up to the highest bidder of the galactic underworld, but not if Fett has anything to say about it. So this comic starts with the syndicates and some Imperials talking before the auction. They don't trust Crimson Dawn. It shows that basically no one there trusts Crimson Dawn, especially because they've just disappeared for so long. And you see that Boku and Jabba the Hutt are arguing. Now, Boku is Boku the Hutt. He was specifically shown in the previous Darth Vader comic, so that would be number 13, which was the one that I tackled in episode 64 of Star Wars Comics in Canon. And as Jabba and Boku are arguing, it's because Boku says that in the invitation, it insinuated that they were being confronted themselves. The Hutt Council is, in his mind, the most powerful crime syndicate, and he thought they were being invited there alone. And because everyone else is there and it's a bidding war, Boku is very insulted by that. Jabba is not insulted by that at all and just basically tells Boku to be quiet. And then it shows Boba Fett outside. There's a few people that are late arrivals and they seem to be like small-time players, and Boba Fett immediately knocks them out and goes to steal some of their clothing. Before he can do that, he is then tied up by Bossk. They have like a tussle, which is quite cool. You know, Bossk ties him up, so Boba Fett shoots fire, which creates steam, and then while Bossk is distracted, then a rocket gets shot off by Boba Fett, and when the rocket lands and explodes, it blows off Bosk's legs. Now, to clarify, Bossk is a very famous bounty hunter, Trandoshan. You know, he's in Empire Strikes Back, basically a reptilian lizard person, to be somewhat derogatory if those creatures existed, but Boba then has Bossk sort of tied up without any legs. Bossk comments that they'll regrow, and then also mentions the Clone Wars when they met. So in the Clone Wars series, when Boba Fett is still just a kid, as you see him in Attack of the Clones, he goes in with the crowd of Aurra Sing, Cad Bane, Bossk, I think Dengar as well, and Dengar in the series is voiced by Simon Pegg, which is always a fun little tidbit of information. And so he kind of mentions how when Boba was young, Bossk kind of helped him and whatnot. And then Boba just leaves Bossk tied to a rock in the cold. Back inside, it shows that Aphra and Sana are discussing Zed. So basically the scene I described to you in the prior comic where Zed's in the bathroom and she's cleaning herself off and those sort of things, almost identical panels are shown in this comic for a couple of pages because the hooded figure then shows up who has a clone voice. Who could that be if it's showing in both of these comics? But then it shows the bidding commences once again, you know, the Hutts are outbidding each other, etc. It shows that Sly Moore actually tries mind-tricking the syndicates to not bid, but the Hutts are too resistant to it. And that's a little throwback to Return of the Jedi because, you know, Luke tries to use the mind trick on Jabba the Hutt and Jabba just laughs in his face. And obviously there are certain creatures or beings that are less susceptible or more susceptible to Jedi mind tricks. And in essence, what Sly Moore's trying to do is a Jedi mind trick, and obviously it doesn't work on the Hutts. So then the Empire can't outbid the Hutts because they are offering 1 million for Solo. It then shows that hooded figure next to Aphra was Boba Fett, unsurprisingly. He manages to go and get his armor, and it shows that Chewie, Lando and Leia are all there, and Luke is en route. And they all kind of confront Boba Fett while he's in the back, and they all look at each other, kind of not sure what to do with each other. And then it shows back in the sort of main room of the auction, Jabba is about to take Solo, and then Vader appears. He says that no, Captain Solo belongs to me, and then it shows that Boba Fett can see that from a distance, and he says to himself, "We'll see." And that's where War of the Bounty Hunters 2 ends. It sounded quite quick because there's a lot of action in it, which is really cool, but also about 20 or 30% of the comic is already shown in the Dr. Aphra comic that I, just relayed, so I'm not just going to relay the same information to you guys again. Here's one thing I've noticed with this is that the War of the Bounty Hunters comics, the mini-series itself, is amazing, but if you read all the other comics as well, there are obviously elements that get repeated, which is fine, but it's just kind of duplicate reading in some sort of way. But that's where War of the Bounty Hunters 2 ends. So as you can tell, pretty much all these comics are sort of centralizing around the auction, apart from the main Bounty Hunters comic, which was meant to be set, before War of the Bounty Hunters 1, just to make everything more confusing. But with that in mind, we move on to the next comic, which is Darth Vader number 14. So Darth Vader 14 is written by Greg Pak, the artist is Raffaele Ienco, and the colour artist is Jason Keith. It was released July 21st, 2021, and the story is called The Blade Behind the Curtain. And here is the crawl. After Exegol, Darth Vader understands the true might of the Emperor's power. Vader must destroy Luke Skywalker, the one threat to his restored position. But others scheme in the shadows, and the dangerous Crimson Dawn syndicate rises to challenge the galactic power structure. Vader's brought Boku the Hutt to heal and foiled an assassination attempt by IG-88. But who hired the deadly droid to kill Darth Vader? So onto the story. So it shows that Vader returns from Exegol and after fighting IG-88, as well as fighting the Giant Beast. Now the Giant Beast, which was seen in the Vader comic, which I don't think I've tackled on the show as of yet, but I'll talk to you about it anyway, just in case you guys have read all the Vader comics and you're catching up with them. The giant creature is a summer verminoth, and you actually see one of them in Solo, a Star Wars story. Now, some people often confuse them with the Maw, which the Maw is basically just a black hole. So in Solo, when they do the Kessel Run and they've got the Millennium Falcon and that giant jellyfish octopus thing tries to attack them, and then they jettison an escape pod which then makes the creature look the other way and then eventually fall into the black hole. That giant creature thing is called a summer verminoth, and the thing that Vader fought is like a subspecies of that kind of creature, but it gives you the kind of scope of how big the creature was that Vader fought prior. It shows that Sly Moore, who is the Umbarum, who was mentioned in the previous two comics, failed to kill Darth Vader, and Palpatine is aware of that she failed because he kind of set her up to it, and so she's now been demoted to sub-administrator. While she's going through some kind of dull tasks and things, the auction relating to Han Solo gets mentioned, and the name Skywalker gets thrown around as well because Han Solo is a known associate of Luke Skywalker. When they're mentioned, Sly then takes an avid interest, and shortly after that she goes and checks Vader's armor specifications, which are found in some sort of data core on Coruscant. She's then confronted by Maz Ameda, who takes the data disk from her, but she seems to mind trick him into basically not telling anyone else about this. Now, Maz Ameda is a character that is quite a small-time character, but you actually see him quite a lot, and he's becoming more and more popular in these comics and things, and I've mentioned him a few times. He is the Grand Vizier to Palpatine. His species is Chagrian, so they are blue-skinned, they have little Montreal tentacles coming down either side of their head, and you see him in the prequels quite a lot. In the 2017 Darth Vader comic, I believe in one of the first issues, which I think I have now tackled on this show, Maz Ameda actually throws Yoda's lightsaber into this big kiln furnace thing along with loads of other Jedi lightsabers and just basically burns them all. But in the prequels, when you see the blue gentleman standing next to Palpatine and has got tentacles and things on either side of his head, that is Maz Ameda. It then shows a little montage of Sly Moore passing those copied details of Vader's suit readout to several different people, and it eventually makes its way to IG-88. Shortly after that, it shows that IG-88 arrives at an area that Sly Moore has been waiting. It shows that he failed to kill Darth Vader, and as she says that they all needed to work together. All of the people in the chain that she passed the data disk to, from one person to another, I think they go for like 6 or 7 people, she says that they all need to work together. 1 million hands can beat Vader, they just need to try. And as she's saying that, Darth Vader then appears with Ochi of Bestoon. Darth Vader slices IG-88 diagonally in half and then pursues the other individuals, but not Sly Moore. Sly Moore uses a remote that she has, and then Vader's suit freezes. Then all of the people that are running away from Vader turn around and start shooting at him with blasters. He manages to deflect all of the blasters and kill basically all of them. Sly Moore then tries to mind trick Darth Vader. She fails, unsurprisingly, and then confirms that before Vader's about to kill her, that only Skywalker could beat Vader, and she wants to try and find Skywalker so that she wins because, tries to kill Vader, but also Vader wins because he's been searching for Skywalker. Vader accepts, as she won't tell Palpatine about his sort of gallivanting around or failing to do this or that, and so Sly Moore goes to this auction. Obviously, it shows that she failed to outbid the Hutts and whatnot, and so she didn't get it. And then it shows that Boku was actually meant to be on Vader's side. And the last panel of this is Ochi speaking with Sly, confirming that it is embarrassing, both for Boku and for Sly, for both failing Vader. And then Vader appears. So that is where that comic ends. Once again, not a hugely long one, but there's a fair amount of dialogue and once again quite a bit of action and things, but obviously in the auction house, which has already been tackled now the third time in this little batch. I'm not going to go over all those details specifically again. But Sly Moore, yep, very pale-skinned individual, has a weirdly high sort of neck collar thing that she seems to always wear, and a very, very light skin, and wears a bit of makeup. I think she's bold as well. So you would recognise her in the prequels as well. Just a fun little character that gets fleshed out a little bit more. So that was Darth Vader number 14, so now we move on to Jabba the Hutt number 1. Or rather, the full title, Star Wars War of the Bounty Hunters Jabba the Hutt 1. Because there is another Jabba the Hutt comic, which is actually the Age of Rebellion Villains Jabba the Hutt 1. And I actually tackled that way back in episode 43 of Star Wars Comics and Canon when I tackled all the other one-shots to do with the villains of the Rebellion era, and I also believe that there was a Boba Fett comic in there as well as a Darth Vader one. So if you haven't already listened to that, go back and listen to that so you can get a little bit more information on those characters, as well as more detailed character bios that I'm giving them here. But Jabba the Hutt 1, it was written by Justina Ireland, and this is her first Star Wars comic, and she's done a really good job in my opinion. She was actually the writer of some of the High Republic books, and the Test of Courage book review that I released 2 weeks ago, she was the writer for that. So there's always going to be some connections to her work there. Now, the artists and the colour artists are split. So you've got present day and flashbacks. This is quite a chunky comic, and unsurprisingly, yeah, there are air quotes present day, and then there are flashbacks, and they're done by different people. So the present day artist is Ibraim Robertson, and the present colour artist is Edgar Delgado. The flashback artist is Luca Pizzari, and the flashback colour artist is Giada Marchisio. The issue was released July 21st, 2021. It is called Trust Issues and is set before War of the Bounty Hunters Alpha, while also during War of the Bounty Hunters Alpha. So the present day is set during that, and the flashbacks are obviously set before that. So with all that in mind, let's get on to the crawl. Jabba the Hutt is one of the most ruthless and powerful crime bosses in the galaxy, and Boba Fett is Jabba's favourite bounty hunter. But Boba's taking too long to deliver Han Solo to Tatooine. Jabba doesn't forgive failure, and he never forgets a betrayal. Just ask Jabba's old favourite hunter, Deva. So to give you a little bit of information about Jabba the Hutt, or to remind you if you've gone back and listened to episode 43 of Star Wars Comics and Canon, or any of the other times that I've mentioned him, Jabba's full name is Jabba Deselagic Tiur. He is around 600 years old. He was born approximately 600 years before the Battle of Yavin. He's born on the planet Nal Hutta, which is where seemingly all the Hutts were actually born. That's like their main home planet. He is 3.9 meters long and 1.75 meters tall. If you want further information on Jabba, please check out episode 43 of Star Wars Comics and Canon, because when I did the Age of Rebellion Villains episode on him, I gave a lot more information, but those are just a couple of fun details. So as I said a little earlier that there's the present day and the flashbacks, I'm going to say that when I start talking about the parts of the story. Hopefully it won't be too confusing, but I just wanted to reiterate that. So, present day. Bib Fortuna tells Jabba that he hasn't heard from Boba Fett. So Jabba asks Deva Lompop. So Deva is a Shani, that's the name of her species, and she's actually seemingly hundreds of years old, as she's going to be in the High Republic at some point. It has been confirmed on StarWars.com that she's going to appear elsewhere, as in the High Republic, and she hasn't appeared anywhere else. So any of you High Republic readers, keep an eye out for her. Be interesting to get a bit more backstory on her. And obviously, as this is written by Justina Ireland, I presume it'll be in a Justina Ireland creation. But in essence, they're green skins, they're slightly reptilian in some ways, and instead of hair coming out the top of their head, they have feathers coming out the top of their head, which is quite cool too. So Bib Fortuna communicates via, hologram comms things, and she's actually in the Dalnan sector. Now, it's hard to pronounce, D-A-L-N-A-N, Dalnan. And the Dalnan sector is in the High Republic books. Which one, you ask? Oh, it's Justina Ireland's one, which is A Test of Courage. And that is the book that I actually did a spoiler-free book review last episode. When I say last episode, I didn't call it numerically episode 67, but the last book review I did was of that. It's a really fun book. It did surprise me. I would recommend you check out the book, but also obviously check out the episode that I did about it, and you'll hear a little bit more about the Dalnan people. So they're speaking, and Bib says that her debt with Jabba will be removed if she completes this job for him. So onto the flashback. It says, some time ago, Jabba has a job for, once again, Deva, but also Boba. And he wants them to get someone called Jarm Brock, who is a Zabrak. Now at this point, Boba Fett is quite young. I mean, he's not young like a child. He still kind of looks the same as he does, in his full armor, but they keep referring to him as a pup. So obviously someone who is new to the game, in air quotes. So this guy, Jarm, he works for Boku the Hutt, and in essence the Council have been disrupting Jabba's operations, as in the Hutt Council, not the Jedi Council, because obviously at this point it doesn't exist anymore. The Hutt Council has been disrupting some of Jabba's operations, so Jabba calls upon Deva and Boba, and Deva, she has got her debt with Jabba the Hutt, so he calls upon that, and then Jabba and Boba go for a walk. Jabba confirms to Boba that he doesn't trust anyone at all, and that Deva has a debt of blood. And then with that, after a little while, the duo head out. Then back in air quotes present day, around the time of the War of the Bounty Hunters Alpha, Deva is on Nar Shaddaa. She's looking for Boba and searches in the arena, which obviously in Alpha you guys remember where he disguised himself as Jango and painted all his armour black. Then at the flashback, Deva and Boba scout out Mos Entha, and they see some Soikans. Now, Soikans are tall humanoids, and one is called Velka Jahen. Now, that's one who's in the High Republic comics. The High Republic comics are really, really good. I will be tackling them soon. And just to clarify, there are Gagiks and Livtaks, which are both Soikans, and a typical Livtak is white-haired, silver-skinned, and has blue eyes. We don't know what a Gagik or a Gagik, Gagics. We don't know what those are specifically, as Soikans are seemingly new species. So back to the flashback, after they see these Soikans, Deva and Boba contact Jabba. They confirm that it can't be the Hutt Council, and so Jabba says that he wants to get Jarm Brock alive to ask him questions and whatnot. So they search, and then they're ambushed in a bar, and Deva knows Jarm, and apparently he's an ex of hers, it seems. There's some shooting and things. Deva and Boba are like trying to hide behind a table. Then she throws a skin-melting gas bomb, which is pretty horrendous. There's a photo of it that is really quite gruesome, surprisingly, for a teen comic, but it's really, really cool. And in that chaos, Jarm runs to his speeder, Boba follows with the jetpack, and then catches him up, throws him out of the speeder, and then he basically begs Boba not to kill him. Then back to present day, Deva meets up with Doc Ragon. He's drunk at a bar, and she spikes his drink, and then communicates with someone and says that she's found something. Now, if you remember, Doc Ragon was actually in War of the Bounty Hunters Alpha, and he is the Besalisk, which is the guy with 4 arms, Dexter Jettster from Attack of the Clones, the guy who talks to Obi-Wan in the bar, who identifies the Kamino and chip thing. That's a Besalisk. And so Doc Ragon is the same species, and he looks quite similar to Dexter Jettster. And as I said, he was in the War of the Bounty Hunters Alpha, and then he gets killed and gets Han Solo's frozen carbonite corpse taken off him. After, Boba Fett gives it to him so Boba can go do the arena stuff. Back to the flashback, Boba has Jarm, and then Deva appears, stabs Boba in the leg. He then flames her, as in he shoots his flamethrower out of his wrist at her. Half of her is like burning, and then it's confirmed that when she stabbed him, she got him with a tiny amount of poison. So he starts to kind of get dizzy and starts to pass out, and then Jarm tells Deva about Crimson Dawn's plans. And in response, she eats him. You don't quite get to see the eating, but you get to see her bottom jaw sort of widen massively, her say she's going to eat him, and then you see her face and then a lot of screaming. Deva then takes Boba Fett to Jabba along with Jarm's head. And then the final conversation in the flashbacks is Deva asks for Jabba to let her die, and Jabba says no. So then back in present day, Deva spots Boba Fett in Nar Shaddaa. She says that she can take him out, and then Bib says for her to stand down, because then Jabba receives the Crimson Dawn invite, and so he's now interested in other things, clearly. Then Deva, in response, gives Crimson Dawn the location of Boba Fett, and by proxy the location of Solo. And then shortly after that, Jabba puts a bounty on Boba Fett's head once he realises that he no longer has Solo, thinking that Boba Fett sold Solo. And then that comic ends with that. But it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Even when I was writing notes, when I've read it, and I've reread it several times, I still don't fully understand the ending. I think what it is Jabba's distracted, and Bib Fortuna tells Deva to stand down while Jabba isn't paying attention. because Jabba's exploring other options, and then they'll reach out to her later if they need her. And then it shows Shani's talking to like a hooded figure who turns out to work for Crimson Dawn and things. And then it goes back to Jabba, and it shows that Bib Fortuna says to Jabba that Boba Fett's contacted us, he's on Nar Shaddaa, and he no longer has Han Solo. And that's when Jabba puts the bounty on him. So I think it's Bib Fortuna who basically kind of partially lied to Jabba, like told Shani not to get Boba, and then because of that got Jabba to set a bounty on him. I want to clarify, it's a really cool comic. The artwork's really good and I really like everything about it. It's just this ending I really don't understand. It doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense to me. Maybe Bib Fortuna's intentions will become more clear later on in this comic run, but it just doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense. I don't know why he'd specifically want there to be a bounty out on Boba Fett. There's no explicit confirmation that Bib has some sort of grudge against Boba Fett or anything. I mean, if I'm missing something, please can someone who's read the comic or whatever tell me, because I don't really fully understand. As I said, I think it might be Bib who kind of did it, but I don't understand the point or why he would do that. It seemed, the ending of this comic just kind of added another layer somewhat, but to not do anything, I don't know. I'm not going to get too wrapped up on it. I would recommend reading this Jabba comic. It is quite cool, but yeah, it's just the ending threw me off a little bit. So that means we move on to the final comic of the War of the Bounty Hunters number 2 batch, and this comic is Star Wars number 15. So Star Wars 15 is written by Charles Soule, the artist is Ramon Rosanas, and the colour artist is Rachelle Rosenberg. It was released July 28th, 2021, and it is titled Friends and Enemies. So here's the crawl. Princess Leia leads a team on a dangerous mission to rescue Han Solo from Crimson Dawn, who stole Solo from the bounty hunter Boba Fett. Meanwhile, Luke Skywalker is desperate to find his path as a Jedi after Darth Vader revealed that he is Luke's father. Now, Luke embarks on his own rescue mission with Starlight Squadron. So the comic starts with Starlight Squadron on a mission to find a rebel division, because there's barely any rebel divisions left. The Empire are slowly isolating them and hunting them down and things, and obviously during the Battle of Hoth they lost a few, and over the other Star Wars comics, which were in this 2020 run by Charles Soule, before the War of the Bounty Hunter stuff, there was a bit more chaos and whatnot, but I'll get into that at a later date when I eventually get onto those comics. So you've got a few characters in Starlight Squadron. The main one is Wedge Antilles, who is amazing. He is in, the original trilogy. He's one of Luke's good friends, and he just is one of the only pilots who seems to survive all of the original trilogy, and he's even in The Rise of Skywalker, which is really cool. There's lots to talk about with Wedge, especially in Legends and stuff, but you guys should know who Wedge Antilles is, so I'm just going to skip over him for the time being. I think I spoke about him in a prior episode, but regardless. Then you've got Luke Skywalker, self-explanatory. Then you've got a guy called Luulo Lampar. Now, he is actually a Duros, which is a species I've tackled in the show before. They look like the stereotypical aliens in a sense. They haven't got noses, they've got big eyes, they've got kind of big bold heads. You'd have recognised them. I think they're in the original trilogy, and they're in Star Wars Battlefront 2, the campaign mode. I think it's Shriv is the guy's name, and there's lots of them in the Star Wars universe. But what's interesting about Luulo Lampar is that he flies an A-Wing, which is cool, and he's also like an uncle to Poe Dameron. Now, in the Poe Dameron comics, which are written by Charles Soule, which is going to be the next big ongoing main series I tackle, once I've done another one Doctor Aphra episode, as well as I think a few more main run of Star Wars episodes, they will all have been caught up with the prelude of the War of the Bounty Hunters. So when those get freed up, I will then be tackling the Poe Dameron comics, because I haven't actually read those yet. Like, I know information about them and I have the general gist of the story, and obviously I've looked things up to do with them, but it's the only Star Wars comics in the current canon that I haven't read, and I'm saving them because, I'm so busy reading all these other things. But anyway, so Luulo is in the Poe Dameron comics. He also appears in the Shattered Empire comics, which is a mini-series that I tackled in episode 4 of Star Wars Comics in Canon, so well over a year ago now. And yeah, he's basically a really, really close friend of Poe's, so that's really cool. Another character that's with them is Avan. Now, Avan Verlaine is actually in the Princess Leia comics, which I tackled in episode 14 of Star Wars Comics in Canon. She also appears in the Aftermath book Life Debt, which is the second of the trilogy, and obviously I mentioned earlier the one by Chuck Wendig, so that's really cool. Another character with them is someone called Mart Matin. Now, Mart Matin, I thought I recognised the name, so I looked this up. He is actually in Star Wars Rebels, the animated show. He is part of Iron Squadron, so he's the nephew of the Commander Jun Sato, and he's in Series 3, Episode 8, which is called Iron Squadron. Anyone who's seen that episode, you'll just remember when the Ghost Crew come across Iron Squadron, and it turns out to be a squad of kids. He's like their leader. that's who it is. So obviously this is what? I think Series 3 of Rebels is like 2 or 3 years before Episode 4 of Star Wars, and then between Episode 4 and 5 is like 3 years. So it's somewhere between sort of 5, 6, 7 years or so, and he was like a teenager in Star Wars Rebels as well, so now he's just a young adult, probably a similar-ish age to Luke. And the other character to note is Freighter Smith, or Freighter Smythe. It's Freighter, Freyta, and then Smith is Smyth. I don't know if that's just an alternate spelling of Smith or something to be Smythe, but she is a Twi'lek, or Twi'lek, so same species as Hera Syndulla and Bib Fortuna. She's, I think, only in the Star Wars comics as well, so there's not much else to add here that I won't be tackling at another point. So that is basically Starlight Squadron at the moment. The reason Luke can be in there and his call sign is normal is because the only other person in Starlight Squadron who isn't there is Poe Dameron's mum, who is Shara Bey, and that gets explained. I think I may have mentioned it in the prelude, but just in case, she basically gets captured at the end of the arc before the War of the Bounty Hunters, and she's like hiding out on an Imperial ship and is sending messages to the rebellion, but seemingly hasn't been captured yet. I presume that's going to be quite a major storyline after War of the Bounty Hunters, but yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. Now the squadron head to Abdalis, which is a planet which is featured in the High Republic novel Light of the Jedi, which was written by Charles Soule. I did a book review for that a little while ago, so make sure if you're on YouTube, check out the book review playlist, or just search or scroll in this feed and you'll be able to find it. So Light of the Jedi did a spoiler-free review on it, but I really recommend people check out that book. In short, there's a great disaster that happens in that. A ship gets destroyed while going in hyperspace, so going light speed, and then pieces of it fling off and hit stuff in really, really short layman's terms. Now, a lot of the things in the book get averted, but one of the systems that gets hit by a piece of the space debris going essentially light speed was this planet, Abdalis. It killed 20 million people and it left this massive crater on the planet. Now, obviously, 200 years later, well, really closer to 250 years later, they're now flying there and they heard about just a piece of rubble going light speed hit the planet. They obviously don't know the intricacies of that, but I really like the fact that you get to see this planet sort of years and years after. It's a very cool thing, and it's something that Charles Soule does quite a lot, as in referring back to previous works, especially stuff that he's done. So anyway, there's a rebel signal near this planet, so they go towards it and they find that it's actually in the crater. Mart Matin mentions that there's an active volcano on the planet, and it seems that the rebels are pinned there. It then shows you the rebels who are pinned down on the ground, and it shows that there's AT-ATs there's lots of stormtroopers and things, and there is also a Star Destroyer nearby, which is preventing any fighters lifting off and evacuating. Once the X-Wings get close enough, the Star Destroyer notices them, and the Admiral on board, who's called Calaxo, sends out TIE fighters to attack them. It shows that the only reason the rebels are actually surviving on this planet is because they've got an energy shield around the base they're holed up in. The energy shield is slowly running out of power, it's had a lot of things bombarded onto it, and the ground rebels actually then send a new target up to the X-Wings, saying to attack the mountain. So Luke flies his X-Wing towards that while everyone else is having like a skirmish with the TIE fighters and things, and he goes to shoot this small area that he has to shoot the torpedoes into, and then he has a sort of vision. He sees the Death Star, and he sees when he was doing the Death Star run in episode 4, you know, when Han Solo flies out and, you know, goes, "It's all yours, kid," whatever, and he shoots Darth Vader and all that stuff. Well, he sees that vision, but he sees it in a different way. He sees, what if Vader actually shot the Millennium Falcon? And it shakes Luke up quite a lot, and then he actually misses the shot, both in his vision, but also in this mountain area that he's in, he completely misses the shot. Fortunately, a couple of members of his squadron were flying behind him. They hit the target and then fly away. The volcano then starts to erupt, and then the lava and magma flies out and then destroys the Star Destroyer, and the rebels are saved, and then Luke leaves. And it turns out that in addition to the sort of ground troop rebels that are on that planet, they also saved Mon Mothma, who is obviously one of the most important members of the rebellion, if not the most important member of the rebellion, sort of in the scheme of organising it. And then the comic ends with showing the main trio, so Lando, Chewie and Leia, on Jakara, and they see Boba Fett, obviously throwing back to War of the Bounty Hunters 2 when that sort of interaction happened. They cut off the comms with Luke because Boba Fett approaches them, and then Luke kind of realises that he thinks that the vision he had was warning him that Darth Vader is going after Han. And then the very final panel shows that Vader is going after Han because obviously he's in the Crimson Dawn ship in Jakara. So that is basically it, guys. I know this Star Wars 15 was a little bit shorter. It's not actually, it's chock-a-block, but there's so much action in it. As I said, I just want to give you guys the footnotes of information so you can read the comics and enjoy it properly yourselves. But that's another chapter of the War of the Bounty Hunters done. Once I get the comics for the next War of the Bounty Hunters, I've got a couple of them at the moment, but I'm still waiting for a few more. Once I've got all of those, I will do War of the Bounty Hunters 3. I don't know if it's going to be 4 episodes from here or if it's going to be a few episodes, because obviously the last 2 weeks of episodes were specials because I was out and couldn't read, loads of Star Wars comics and make loads of notes and record it all. So instead I did the Test of Courage book review that I recorded a little bit before that, and also I released the Patreon review that me and Megan did of the prequels. So if you want something a little bit different on the feed of Star Wars Comics and Canon, go and check those out because they were fun to do. But what else is coming up then? So as always, in the description there's links to the guest spots I've been recently involved with. There's the Have Not Seen This podcast, where I spoke about one of my favourite ever movies, The Way Back. And then with Comics in Motion in the last month or so, I've been on loads of different shows. I'm not going to list them all, but check the description and you'll find them out. So the next episode of Star Wars Comics and Canon is going to be, obviously, episode 69, the funny number, and that is going to be about the finale of the main run of Star Wars comics that started in 2015. So they're the ones that are written by Greg Pak. It's going to be issues 73 to 75, as well as the finale in Empire Ascendant, which is sort of one-shot finale thing. And then the week after that, I'll be tackling the 3rd volume of the Darth Vader comics, which is the 2017 Darth Vader comics by Charles Soule. And then the week after that, I may end up doing the next Doctor Aphra comics, which will be the volume that then connects it to the War of the Bounty Hunters prelude, or I'll be doing War of the Bounty Hunters 3. I'll be more inclined to do the Aphra comics, just so then I'm kind of done with Aphra until we finish the War of the Bounty Hunters, and then it's been enough time that I can do another full arc of Doctor Aphra. But I'll kind of cross that bridge when I come to it. But the main thing is, next week, guys, if you are reading along with me, make sure you read the last 3 comics of the main run of Star Wars comics from 2015, and also the one-shot Empire Ascendant. And if you've got the trade paperback of Rebels and Rogues, then the Empire Ascendant story will be in there. There's not really much else to add here then, guys, so, check out all the other guest spots and things I've been involved with. Check out my show, Genuine Chit-Chat, where I have honest conversations with interesting people, and, I've got so many great guests and things, and I actually just recorded an episode with Jack of Season's Greetings on the Comics in Motion feed, as well as Pop Gorillas, and he's a really, really cool guy. He's been on Indie Comic Spotlight a few times too, and he's a great member of the Comics in Motion family, and I finally got a chance to sit down and chat with him, and we just spoke about movies for near enough 2 hours, so really, really fun there, especially if you are a movie buff. That will be released not this week, so it's not going to be released on the 29th of August. It'll be released the week after that, so the first Sunday of September, I think it is. That's going to be when that is up, I think, or part 1 at least will be up, and then part 2 will be out after that. But obviously, guys, if you go over to patreon.com/genuinechitchat, you can support the show for as little as £1 a month, and you get access to all of the audio content that I do for the show, as in all the bonus episodes, so you get all the afterthoughts things when me and Megan review movies and TV series and things, as well as our road trip that we went on, which is why there's those 2 bonus episodes, because I was away, so you get to listen to what we got up to there. In addition to that, you get early access to stuff like the book review is released on there several days early, and also whenever I release part 1 and part 2 of episodes of Genuine Chit Chat, part 1 and 2 get dropped in one full unsplit episode when part 1 drops on the normal feed. That is enough plugging from me, guys. I am tired. So thank you as always for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you listening, especially all the way to the end where I'm a rambly mess. And I'll talk to you guys next week with the finale of the 2015 Star Wars comics. And as always, guys, may the Force be with you. The intro for Star Wars Comics and Canon is arranged by myself, Mike Burton, and the backing music was made by Eric Matias of soundimage.org.
You have just experienced host, creator, everything elser of Genuine Chit-Chat, and also the host and creator of Star Wars Comics and Canon, found on the Comics in Motion podcast, Mike Burton.